When you start learning jazz chords, then you're learning chord progressions and you focus on connecting the chords and playing through the changes in a way that sounds natural and logical. But the skills you develop doing this are not necessarily going to help you when you encounter a longer stretch of a single chord. In that case, you don't have a chord progression that automatically is going to make what you play sound great. In this video, I'm going to give you some examples of how you can deal with this, how you can develop phrases, add extra chords and even some chromaticism, sound really great comping on a modal situation or on a static chord. My name is Jens Larsen. Learn jazz, make music. There are essentially two strategies that you can choose from here. You can choose to focus on the sound of the chords and then try to play these long sustained chords where you're really thinking about the structure. And usually this means that you're playing chords that have a lot of notes and probably also some sort of interesting structure in terms of being sort of very large or maybe have a lot of close intervals. The other approach would be to focus much more on the musical statements that you're playing. So develop phrases and then try to work with them, work with different aspects of this like rhythm, melody and even harmony when you're comping. Of course, when you're playing a song, it's not going to be one approach or the other. You can actually go back and forth between the two and you should be able to play both, I think. The most important thing to take away from this video is that when you're comping on a single chord, you cannot only just think about, okay, I need to play D minor 7. You really have to start thinking about the way that you comp as a musical statement. So you have to think about it having a rhythm and a melody and it has to be a musical phrase. And this first example is really just a basic version of that. And it sort of has a call response concept to it. So first I get a call with just the 3-note voicing here. It's actually all just coming out of this basic D minor 7 voicing. But first just the 3-note version, and then as a response, and then a development of the first call, which is just changing the rhythm, and then again the same response. And really what I'm doing here is just setting up a musical statement and trying to develop it. And that's also how you should work with these examples. Try to learn to play them and then just try to make variations on them. Because if you're thinking in terms of it being a riff, then it's something that you're repeating. It's connecting everything you're doing and it's making it a lot easier for the rhythm section to log in with you and for the soloist to improvise over, because it's developing, but it's still a little bit predictable. In this example, I'm introducing a diatonic passing chord, and this is something that's, I think, coming back in all the other examples that I'm gonna go over in this video. So what's happening here is I have this voicing that's a D minor. It's clearly just an F major triad. That's the upper part of a D minor 7. And then of course this, which is sort of the upper part of this D minor 7. But I'm using these two, and then I'm adding this G major triad in between. And as you can see in the example, I didn't write down that this is a G major triad because I'm not really thinking about that it's another chord. I'm really just thinking about it as something that I can go to in between the other ones, and I just use it to connect the other voicings. So in that way, I'm moving from this one and then playing a melody just from the C up to the E, down to the D, and then another stepwise motion. And here we have, so I'm using the G on the 1 in bar 2, but on the heavy bar, so on the first and the third bar, I'm sticking with something that sounds like D minor, because you still want to have the sound of the chord in there, but you can use the diatonic passing chord in between. The first two examples were relying on the melody to tie things together and create a musical statement. And in this example, I'm actually having a static melody, so I'm using a pedal point in the melody, which in this case is the 9th of the chord, the E. And the way I'm doing this is that I'm playing first this D minor 9, then moving to this, which is again a diatonic passing chord. It's really just an E minor triad. But the point here is that it's just voice leading, moving it to this one, and then moving down to this, which is essentially an F major shell voicing, which also works as a D minor 9. And then I can have this movement under the static melody. So. Quartal harmony and quartal voicings are very often connected to modal playing, and of course that's also what you hear McCoy Tyner play behind Coltrane very often. And in this case, that's also what I'm using here. I'm starting with a pretty clear D minor 7 with an 11 voicing, so that's this one. What also happens very often with comping with quartal voicings is that you just move around the scale in a stepwise motion, and that's also what this melody does. So I'm just moving this voicing up the scale and then skipping down to repeat and work with it as a sort of riff in that way. And of course it makes sense that if you want to explore this, you want to know which chord voicings are really going to fit the chord. So this one is a sort of really straight ahead one for a D minor 7, but you also just want to check out all the other quartal voicings that you have in the scale and then try and make melodies with them. A good way to create a self-contained and not too busy but still quite interesting comping is to think in call response and then have 2 layers happening in the comp, and that's what I'm doing in this example. So we have a higher part of the comp, that's this part, and then you get a response that's moved to lower strings, like, and then that goes back and forth. And of course, if you're working with this, then the way you probably want to do this is that you play and then develop it. And in that way, just try and develop some interesting sort of conversations with yourself without really getting in the way of what the soloist is doing. Besides using diatonic passing chords and moving things around the scale, you can also add chromatic chords. So here I'm using quartal harmony, so first just the basic D minor quartal harmony here, moving up the scale, but then between the melody note G and A, I'm adding a G sharp, so, and I'm just harmonizing that as well with this voicing. So I have, and this works extremely well for quartal harmony because quartal harmony is anyway sort of a very open, not necessarily that clear sound, but you can just create tension by moving and adding chromatic leading notes in between. And of course, using chromaticism like that is not only for quartal harmony, you can also do it like I'm doing in this example, where starting with just the basic D minor and then approaching this D minor 11 with this E flat minor chord and adding some quartal harmony after it. In this video, I'm focusing on what you're doing with the voicings rather than what voicings you're playing for the most part. And that is of course also the most important thing, I think. But at the same time, you also want to have a solid vocabulary of chord voicings. You can do this with any type of voicing really, as you can also see in the examples. But if you want to expand your vocabulary, then check out this video where I'm going over 9 different types of voicings that all work really well for playing jazz and essentially are things that you want to have in your chord voicing or comping vocabulary.